For nearly 50 years, South Africa lived with a paradox: two polos, one market, and millions of shoppers who thought they were buying the same brand. Now, the brand battle is over. Ralph Lauren, the global luxury giant, now owns every part of the polo identity in South Africa. Welcome back to the buyout Pulse, where we look at the brands, trends, marketing, sales, and business strategies that are shaping the world. Today, we're going to be unpacking how a trademark standoff led to a buyout, why Ralph Lauren chose acquisition over litigation, and what this means for the South African polo stores, pricing, and product access. Stick around until the end, where we will share the IP lessons that every brand leader needs to learn. The polo trademark situation in South Africa was a decades-long demonstration of how early IP decisions can echo through an entire market. The South African polo brand secured its trademark in 1976, long before global luxury brands prioritized international protection. When Ralph Lauren eventually expanded globally, they discovered they couldn't use the polo name in South Africa without infringing on the local company's rights. Despite registering their polo trademark in 1967, this created an unusual ecosystem where a globally recognized luxury brand was competing with a homegrown version that looked similar enough to confuse customers, but operated under entirely different product philosophies. Over the years, both brands have built their own loyal customer bases, and the conflict moved from simple trademark disputes to questions around brand identity, market fairness, and consumer perception. Now, it's important to understand that the South African brand wasn't a counterfeit. It was legally legitimate. This was all just before global copyright law was really something that companies worried about. That made the conflict harder to resolve and significantly more expensive to fight. Ultimately, the gridlock became a strategic bottleneck for Ralph Lauren. Owning every other global market but not South Africa created an awkward brand blind spot, and removing that inconsistency became more valuable than continuing the legal tug-of-war. A brand is more than a logo. It's the story people believe. For 50 years, two companies shared one symbol, and eventually the story had to resolve somehow. But the final chapter didn't come through court filings, it came through a corporate decision. Luxury brands thrive on consistency. Same logo, same product, same experience, no matter where you shop. Having a permanent exception in South Africa undermined that consistency, especially in a world where customers travel frequently, follow global influencers, and expect brands to be the same everywhere. Ralph Lauren had already tested the legal route in the past, and the results were mixed at best. Courts tend to protect earlier trademarks, but South Africa places stronger emphasis on local business rights. Even if Ralph Lauren eventually won, the fight could take another decade, drain millions, and still result in an unpredictable outcome. A buyout, by comparison, creates controlled certainty. Ralph Lauren not only closed the dispute, but also gained access to retail local infrastructure, store leases, supplier relationships, and a customer base that was already accustomed to buying polo. That's far more efficient than entering the market from scratch. In essence, Ralph Lauren bought time, market access, and brand control in one move. Three things that no legal battle could guarantee. The takeaway is that in branding, the strongest leverage isn't in awareness, it's in ownership. In their case, Ralph Lauren won the battle because it bought the battlefield. Stick around to find out what changes now for shoppers and stores across South Africa. For South African consumers, the end of the two-polo era means a shift towards alignment with global Ralph Lauren standards. This won't happen overnight, but the long-term changes will be noticeable. First is the product range. Instead of the locally designed polo items, which often leaned more towards accessible fashion basics, shoppers will eventually see the same seasonal collections, premium materials, and iconic Ralph Lauren staples found in New York, London, and Paris. Second is quality expectation. Ralph Lauren's global supply chain prioritizes higher-end fabrics and more sophisticated craftsmanship, which will raise both perceived and actual quality on the shelves. Third is pricing. With higher quality comes higher pricing, but also a clearer understanding of what the brand represents. Customers also won't be guessing whether they're buying the global polo or the South African polo anymore. Fourth is store experience. Ralph Lauren stores globally are built around ambiance, luxury retail standards, and a consistent aesthetic. South African stores that previously leaned mid-market may transition into more premium environments. And number 5 is brand access. This acquisition could also open the door for South Africa to receive product lines it never had before. RLX, Purple Label, and even collaborations that were previously unavailable. The short-term impact is change. The long-term impact, though, is clarity, consistency, and a stronger luxury presence in the local market. The takeaway is that consumers gain clarity while Ralph Lauren gains territory and the South African fashion landscape becomes more predictable and also more premium. But beneath the retail reshuffle lies a deeper lesson. Stay until the end to find out what it is. Intellectual property isn't the most glamorous side of branding, but it's arguably the most powerful. The Polo situation proves that whoever controls the trademark controls the market, even if they don't necessarily control the global brand. When IP ownership is fragmented, brands are forced into compromises. They lose leverage, they lose control over their story, and they lose the ability to protect their reputation from confusion or dilution. Ralph Lauren's global brand was strong enough to withstand this anomaly, but many brands aren't so lucky. This acquisition underscores a bigger truth. IP ownership creates commercial power long before marketing does. Companies with strong IPs negotiate from a position of strength. They block competitors from key markets and capture licensing opportunities, as well as build consistent global identities. Companies without it end up reacting instead of leading. This case is a reminder that the invisible assets, trademarks, design patents, and even naming rights often dictate who wins the long game. The takeaway is that brands lose control long before they lose customers. They lose it when they lose their symbols. So what should modern brands learn from the Polo saga? A brand's logo and name are more than just aesthetic choices. They're economic tools that shape customer trust and drive market recognition. But those symbols only hold value if a company actively protects them. If not, someone else eventually will. The South African Polo brand didn't do anything wrong. In fact, it protected the trademark early and leveraged it successfully for decades. But as soon as a larger global entity with deeper pockets and stronger international infrastructure entered the market, the imbalance became clear. A local brand can survive for a long time, but it becomes vulnerable if its trademark overlaps with a global powerhouse that sees more long-term strategic value in the territory. This is the cautionary tale. If a brand doesn't aggressively guard its identity across markets, categories, and time zones, it risks losing the very thing that makes it recognizable in the first place. In a globalized world, symbols are currency. The brands that defend them last. The brands that don't get absorbed, outmaneuvered, or overshadowed. In a globalized world, symbols are currency. The brands that defend them last. The brands that don't get absorbed, outmaneuvered, or overshadowed. The takeaway is that modern branding doesn't happen on shelves or even on screens. It happens in the trademark office. IP is as much a competitive advantage as it is a legal formality. The Polo story is a lesson for every brand fighting for cultural relevance and market control. For half a century, South Africans have lived with two polos. One symbol grew local and one symbol grew global. And in the end, ownership decided the winner. I'm Rob, and this has been the DR Pulse. If this breakdown helped sharpen your strategy, hit the like button, subscribe, and drop your thoughts below. Should global brands control their symbols everywhere? Or should local icons stay independent?